Well, back to Bob Martin. Of course, he was your buddy by the time you got here, but what were some of your recollections of Dr. Martin in those first 5 or 6 years that you were here when he was president, kind of at the height of his power, I guess?
Well, I remember when we had the Southern Association evaluation in 75 or 6, they came down very hard on us because we had 4 and 5 professors sharing an office in the old university building. Particularly all the social science people, the history people did the same thing. And so Martin said that has to change. And although we did not get into new offices until 78, after he had retired, he set the machinery in motion. And when I went to the Keith building to see my new office, I noticed I had a bright orange door. And orange is not a good color, particularly if you're a UK alum. And as a result, I asked the custodian, I said, why are the doors down this hallway bright orange, bright green, blue, and yellow? And he said, Dr. Martin walked down this hallway a couple of years ago, and he said, yellow, green, orange, blue. And Bob Martin definitely liked to control things. And he had the Keith building renovated and the door colors chosen before he retired. And so we did move into private offices, which was wonderful.
That was a good example of the extent to which Dr. Martin made specific decisions. This door is orange, this door is blue.
That's true.
I guess that was also the first building that was converted from a dormitory to
I think it was one of the first, and the irony was that in 1958 I attended Boys State along with a couple of hundred young men from across the state, and I had stayed in the same room on the 3rd floor of Keith that became my private office. That always struck me as ironic. And Dr. Martin had been our keynote speaker at Boys State in 1958 while he was still Secretary of Education.
Interesting. Well, just in a sentence or two, what would you say, and there's so many things you could say, but the major contributions that Dr. Martin made to EKU?
Well, I think the most obvious contributions are still with us. Certainly the planetarium was his dream. He fought for it. He got the money. He brought Jack Fletcher here before the planetarium ever opened. And it was, at the time, the 2nd largest planetarium in the university system in the country. I think the law enforcement school probably was his greatest contribution. It is #1 in terms of size and quality, and particularly my last 15, 20 years, I had many outstanding young men and women that were from all over the country. And I would say, well, why did you end up at Eastern if you're from Pennsylvania or you're from California? And they said the law enforcement school reputation is the best in the country. And I think that was perhaps his greatest contribution, although a lot of faculty did not like the idea. They thought that this would lower the quality of education for some reason. And I taught a lot of extension classes for state troopers. And I think the quality of state police and policemen has improved immensely because of that. I think he did a lot for the education department, which had a marvelous reputation under O'Donnell, but I had a couple of friends that were administrators in Ohio and in Jefferson County, and they said in the 70s and 80s they always gave preference to EKU graduates. And I had a personal friend who hired about 30 into the Hamilton County, Ohio school system. So I think he certainly promoted the College of Education.
When we think, though, about law enforcement and then later nursing, of course, we should mention John Rowlett always, because John seemed to have a vision for certain kinds of niches that
service jobs, I think,
and career-oriented kinds of programs, and doesn't EKU has the largest nursing program in the state,
right.
too, don't we?
Well, I think it is.
I think it is,
Probably
yeah.
is.
And of course, most of you will recall John Rowlett, who was a longtime Vice President for Academic Affairs here for several decades, and just passed away recently, 2 or 3 years ago. Well, probably more than that now, but Dr. Powell was followed by Dr. Hanley Funderburk, who came here from Alabama. Any specific memories of the Funderburk era and what the campus was like in the late 80s and 90s?
I saw quite a few changes during the Funderburk years. Many people felt President Funderburk was distant or cool, but I had a very good relationship with President Funderburk, I think for a variety of reasons. As you mentioned, at the time I was making a lot of talks to local clubs. He was very active in the Rotary Club, and I made talks to them almost every year there for a while. He always called me after one of my speeches, and I had never had an administrator do anything like that. So it impressed me that he would take the time, you know, on an afternoon basis and call me and thank me for my comments that I'd provoked thought or informed him of something he didn't know. We had our bicentennial history, the local celebration while he was president, and he called and complimented me on the book that I had co-authored, and he also came to quite a few of the festivities and activities where I spoke. Again, he always touched base with me on that. And
now, see, that's a side of President Funderburk that I didn't know about.
a lot of people didn't see that,
yeah.
I think. And I did notice that there were a lot more women, not only hired during his years, but into administrative positions. And I remember Libby Wachtel and Ann Stebbins, Virginia Falkenberg, any number of ladies were promoted to administrative posts under Funderburk. So I think he tried to go with the times and give women greater voice in the university policies. I think Funderburk's greatest accomplishment, without any doubt, was the creation of the honors program in 1988. And he chose Bonnie Gray from the philosophy department to head it. And she just retired in May after 20 years. It is one of the finest honors program in the country.